Welcome to New York Got Game.
Welcome back to the first New York Got Game of 2025. Happy New Year to everyone. This is the last time you are going to hear me say Happy New Year. This is the cutoff. Don't say it after today. I said this on the live stream last week. You won't hear it after today's show. We're done with the Happy New Year's, but wishing everybody a Happy New Year. Hopefully you had a great end to 2024. We're kicking off 2025 the first way with the first full week of 2025. In this episode, we're going to talk a lot about the Knickerbockers as we do this thing remotely for the next couple of weeks as we transition to our new studios. But with the Knicks, plenty to talk about because the team was hot with a 9-game winning streak. They're on a 2-game skid. Some Knicks fans are concerned, and rightfully so. There's some things that you may have seen that they didn't like in this 2-game skid. There are some questions about the Knicks and their roster construction and depth, and we're going to get into that this week. We've got two good guests to talk about it. One to talk about the Knicks, the other to break down a matchup later in this week for the Knicks, who are about to start a 5-game homestand this week. So the Knicks, who've been on the road a lot, they're going to get some home games, a ton of them in this month of January. We're going to talk about all of that. Like I said, two really good guests. Let's not waste any time, guys. Let's get right into it.
The Knicks are heating up.
New York Knicks have lost 2 in a row after they had won 9 games straight, back-to-back losses to the Thunder and the Bulls. And Knicks Nation in a bit of panic. A lot to talk about with the Knickerbockers this week as they start a 5-game homestand. And joining me to talk about the Knickerbockers is the great beat writer covering the Knicks for the New York Post, my guy Stefan Bondy, here with me now. Steph, what's going on? Happy New Year. It's the last day I'm saying it. I don't say Happy New Year after today. Last time I'm saying it to you. Happy New Year. How you doing, brother?
Good, man. Happy New Year. I appreciate you saving me for last, man. That makes me feel special.
Yeah, man. There has to be a cutoff. I know Larry David said it's around the 3rd. There has to be a cutoff. I've extended it a little bit to the 5th. You can't go past there, but here we are. You're back home. Knicks are on a homestand, but I want to talk to you about what's been going on with this team recently, right? Back-to-back losses, as I mentioned just there at the top. And with these back-to-back losses, roster depth has come up as a major issue around this team. Is roster depth the major weakness of this Knicks squad right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm not going to rank their weaknesses. I would have to give that some more thought, but it's something that we knew was going to be a problem right from the beginning of the season, just because they sacrificed so much to get what they did during the summer. Karl-Anthony Towns, and Mikal Bridges. And, before they traded for Karl-Anthony Towns, you were looking at maybe one of, if not the best bench in the NBA, because theoretically, if you had Mitchell Robinson healthy, you then bring in Dante DiVincenzo, Miles McBride, and Josh Hart off the bench. Now you have an injured Miles McBride. He hasn't played for the last 3 games. And you had to kind of cobble together a bench out of no cap space. You used Precious Achiuwa's bird rights to bring him back. You had to, hope some rookies pop, whether that's Tyler Kolek or Pacome Dadier or Elliot Hookporty. I don't think they've quite earned Tibbs' trust just based on the playing time we've seen. And then, you would have hoped Landry Shamet would have popped. He obviously dealt with that shoulder injury. So, listen, they have the lowest bench production in the NBA. I haven't looked lately, but, fairly recently they had the lowest bench minutes in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually that could take its toll. And, we kind of saw in a back-to-back scenario where they went all out to win in OKC. It didn't happen. OKC might easily be the best team in the NBA. They just smoked the Celtics in the fourth quarter here.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, they went all in, and then the next day they looked gassed, like in Chicago in a game they should have won. And now, Karl-Anthony Towns went down at the end of it. He avoided like a serious injury, like a tear or a broken bone or anything like that, but he's questionable for tomorrow with knee soreness. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's the number one weakness or number one problem, but it's up there.
Yeah, no, it's up there right now. And you know this, Steph, because when it comes to this talk about the Knicks depth, and I think you outlined it so well there, you got the minutes police around the Knicks, especially the Knicks fans who are not Tom Thibodeau fans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does Tibbs need to change anything in his rotation Can he, or is this sort of what you were just talking about, where this is a product of basically there are limitations with the cap, the second apron? That, I know you don't like talking about the apron, and I don't either, but is it just that it's a limitation of what we're seeing with the new apron rules in the NBA, and this is just kind of what it is with this Knicks roster?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a chicken and the egg argument. Like if Tibbs had given these guys more of a leash and an opportunity,
Mm,
would they have, shown something else or played better? Um, it's clear that out of everybody on the bench at this point, he really trusts Miles McBride and doesn't trust anybody else as much. Certainly, I think he'll give Precious Achua some rope. But early in the season, he was given minutes to Jericho Sims, and now that's gone out the window. Jericho Sims is completely out of the rotation. Um, so he gave him an opportunity, and it didn't work out. I think, it's hard for me to say. I'm not gonna, pretend like I'm in the gym with these guys every day and say this is what this guy's capable of, this is what this guy is not capable of. But just from a historical perspective, second round picks in the NBA don't tend to work out. They don't tend to be part of rotations of winning teams. It's just not the way, the history of the league has been. And what you have with the Knicks now is guys on minimum contracts, guys like a guy like Matt Ryan who was waived a bunch of times, and the Knicks were hoping he'd pop, and those kind of guys they tend not to work out, and that's what the Knicks are dealing with right now.
yeah, that's what they're dealing with. I'm curious. I don't know if you have an answer to this, Steph, as a follow up to that, as somebody who's covered basketball for such a long time. Do you think that, Tibbs likes to trust you use the word trust. He trusts Miles McBride. You
Mhm.
said that. Do you think that trust is gained through playing time, right? Or just getting those opportunities on the court? And does that help your team getting young players opportunity on the court? Or is that trust gained in practice, where the coach says, okay, yeah, I think this dude is ready for this. I think he's ready to get on the court. Do you have a preference on what you maybe think is better for a team, based on your observations over the years, covering the NBA over the years?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're a losing team, like I covered a lot of losing teams in New York, you'd like to see that development happen during games on the court.
Mm,
The Knicks are not a losing team though. They're trying to win every single game. So that's also the way Tibbs is wired. I know the fans want to say, "Hey, why don't we just punt this game and sit our starters?" I understand that logic. That's not what Tibbs is about. He's never done that in his entire career.
nope.
His message is, if you're healthy, you play. So, ideally, yeah, you want to develop in real NBA games, but that's not where the Knicks are right now. So, if you're going to be a liability on the court and Tibbs puts you in for 5 minutes and all of a sudden a 10-point lead becomes a 5-point lead, that's it. He's seen enough. And that's kind of how he's been since he's gotten here. I mean, I know fans were really upset that he didn't give Obi Toppin enough rope or Cam Reddish, but that's just if you have not earned his trust yet, he is going to have a quick hook, and that's kind of what we're seeing with the bench right now. And some guys aren't even given an opportunity for a hook because it's only an 8-man rotation right now without
Right.
Miles McBride.
Yeah, that's it. It's an 8-man rotation right now. Want to go back with you on with a couple of the recent games that we saw. The Thunder game, right? Hyped up game. Knicks came in winning 9 straight. Thunder had their streak going. Knicks, they're up 14 in this one. You were there. What stood out to you in that game? And is there anything that Knicks fans should be encouraged about watching the game the team could build on from that game? Because there's one side of it where you can say, hey, they played with arguably, you just said it, the best team probably in the NBA right now. But then the other side is depth was kind of an issue there. So what were your takeaways from that Thunder game?
Yeah, I mean, kind of just what you said, because I think it was the second quarter. I mean, I've covered so many games, I can't remember which quarter is which, but I
Second
think it
quarter
was,
was their great quarter in that
yeah,
one. Yeah.
yeah. So they looked like a championship contender for a quarter. They were hitting on all cylinders, and what stood out to me, and I think a lot of people recognize this as well, is when the fourth quarter hit, I kind of knew what was going to happen just because the Knicks had, every Knicks player had played over 40 minutes. Nick Starter had played over 40 minutes. So that was the first time that it had happened since 2013, and in a regulation game, not in overtime. And like in the fourth quarter, it was like they threw out their fresh players, and Shea Gilgeous Alexander is the best player on the court. And when you have the best player on the court, when it's winning time in the fourth quarter, that tends to mean a lot more, and it did. On top of that, you have a bench where I think they only scored 5 points in that game, the Knicks bench, and the Thunder had Wiggins by himself have 19. So when you match up the depth and then you translate that into the fourth quarter where legs might be a little bit more tired, it was somewhat predictable what was going to happen. So I think that's what I saw in that game. With that being said, when you look at the Knicks and that starting unit is one of the best in the NBA, when they're clicking like that, they can match up with anybody. It's just a matter of how can they sustain that and get to minute 48 while playing that way.
Yeah, that is the big question for the Knicks. Now we move on, Steph, to the Bulls game, because when you look at that game, it looked like one where they just ran out of gas. Was that one where it was simply just energy because it was so zapped from the previous game on the second night of a back-to-back? Or is it more of a structural roster issue that you're seeing with the reason they lost that game? Or both?
I mean, so it was a schedule loss because it wasn't just that it was a back-to-back. That part was important, but the Knicks now, as of today, I think they're tied for the most road games in the NBA, and with the Pacers. So now that was the last of their really hard road stretch. And when you have road, and believe me, I've been on the road with them. I know how hard it is. And they talked after the game of how how important it is to actually sleep in your own bed and not have to worry about travel the next day when you're going to bed at 4 a.m. and all this and that. I think that being the last game of this really tough road stretch, the games have been, the opponents have not been as difficult, but just the sheer amount of road games has been. And then, being on a back-to-back after going all out in OKC, then you're playing a team that likes to run and gun. It caught up with them. Everything did. And going into that game, I was talking to a couple people and I said, I think this is a schedule loss. And that's what it looked like by the end.
Yeah, it definitely did. Looks like they just didn't have it there in the second half. I want to talk about the injuries because you mentioned Karl-Anthony Towns. Seems like he avoided a serious knee injury, and there's some talk you can say about should Tibbs have got him off the court earlier or got him out the game. You have that Miles McBride still dealing with the hamstring injury. How serious are these injury concerns, even though it looks like Cat will be okay? You said he's questionable for tomorrow, right? He's questionable for Monday's game against Orlando. How serious are these injuries, as small as they may be, with the depth issues that we just talked about?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple things. I would be concerned about Cats just because it's a overuse type of injury where
Mm,
there's nothing torn or broken, but there's gonna be pain. I've covered plenty of players when they had to play through pain all season, and really the only way to solve the problem is to rest. And the Knicks aren't in a position where you could say, all right, well, you know what, I know your knee's hurting. Let's give you a rest because who's the alternative right now? They're going to start Jericho Sims again, and then have a two-man front court of Jericho Sims and Precious Achua, and then maybe Ariel Hukporti gets called up, and then you're back to where it's like, man, this depth is really a problem. So it is concerning. Every injury with the Knicks is concerning. I think Miles McBride had a similar knee problem earlier this season where he missed a couple games, I think like 4 or 5 games, something like that. So this is concerning. Everything, like I said, everything is concerning. I will say this after the game, Karl-Anthony Towns limped into the locker room. He was limping, but he had just completed like a 20-minute intense weight training session, and he was exhausted, but he was like, "Listen, I'm fine."
mm.
Um, and I think that he feels that he's fine, but if the knee pain is going to be persistent, then it is a problem.
Yeah, it could be a problem. Knicks fans got to keep an eye on that. I know you'll be keeping your eye on that. With all these things we're talking about with depth, Steph, fans are going to look to the next couple of weeks and they're going to talk about the trade market. With everything that we just talked about, should the Knicks use the trade market to try to, improve the depth on their team? Can they even do that with the apron restrictions? And what kind of players should they target if they are going to try to improve the depth on this team?
Well, a lot of it is dependent on the big unknown that we've been talking about forever, which is what
Yeah.
the heck is going on with Mitchell Robinson. If he's able to come back and be Mitchell Robinson, the Mitchell Robinson we know, then one problem is definitely solved. It's tough for me say let's rely on Mitchell Robinson at this point. He hasn't played since April of last year. Last year at this point. He's had surgery to both feet areas, and you have to question, not only will he come back. I know that he's on a projection to come back right now, but you question how long will he actually be healthy when he does come back. So there are a lot of question marks out there. The Knicks can, because they're in the luxury tax, they can't take back more salary than they're giving out in the trade. There's still ways to do it. You could use Mitchell Robinson's salary in any swap. You can use Miles McBride is certainly a piece that people would be intrigued with, but then you're taking away somebody who's actually part of the rotation and an important part of the rotation. And in terms of draft capital, they basically spent it all in the summer for Mikal Bridges and Karl-Anthony Towns. They still have a protected pick from the Wizards that they can use, but that pick is not going to convey this year. And people around the league view it as 2 second-round picks, because that will be ultimately what it will become if it doesn't convey the following year. And the Wizards are so bad that people don't think it's going to convey. So they're dealing with a lot of limited assets here. And we have to see how it unfolds, but it's back to the question that we've been asking for a long time. What's going on with Mitchell Robinson?
Yep, that is the question. And by the way, got to give you credit. You answered the question very well versed in the cap and the apron stuff there. I feel like you've been doing your thing, man. You've been doing your thing.
You got to when you're dealing with today's NBA. I did it reluctantly and begrudgingly.
Begrudgingly. There you go. Mm-hmm. Begrudgingly, you did it there. All right, a couple more things. Knicks, they got a 5-game homestand. They kicked that off on Monday, hosting Orlando. There is a rematch with the Thunder during this homestand. How crucial do you view this homestand in terms of the Knicks righting the ship after this 2-game skid?
Yeah, crucial. I think that they still have to, what they entered that game in OKC, it was, all right, well, you beat a bunch of bad teams. Show us who you really are. And they did it for about 3 quarters or 2.5 quarters. And then the Thunder kind of flexed their superiority in a lot of departments. Now, keep in mind, in that game, the Thunder were playing on a back-to-back. The Knicks had a day off before that game, so you can't really say it was about rest in that game until you got to the final quarter, where it was like, all right, well, their players have played only 20 minutes and ours have played 30. So, I don't looking forward. I'm not going to say anything at this point. It's still early January. I'm not going to say anything is do or die, but they still have to show everybody in the NBA. And certainly from a national perspective, I don't think they're getting the respect of a legitimate contender. I think in order to achieve that status, if they care about it, is to beat a team like OKC at home. So I think that's a big game.
Yeah, I think that will be a big game on Friday night. That should be a big one for sure. Fans will be excited about that. Last thing for me, Steph, because I want to try to take a big picture view on this with everything we've talked about. With these recent losses, right? You still got to say the Knicks, before these 2 losses in a row, they had won 9 in a row, right? Although you had the caveat there, they hadn't really played much upper echelon competition. They had their chance against the Thunder. But when you look at all this, including these 2 losses right here, how are you evaluating this Knicks team? Are they headed still in the right direction? As if you want to put them now as a fringe contender, do you still look at them as headed in the right direction despite these last 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if they're healthy and they go into a 7-game series where the starters play a ton of minutes anyway, I put that starting lineup up there with anybody in the East after Boston. I still think Boston is the number 1 team in the East, even though they just lost to OKC. But a lot of it is their health and their depth. We've been talking about it a while. And they don't have that room for error. Like the Boston Celtics can lose Kristaps Porzingis and they'll be okay. The Knicks can't lose anybody. That's just the way they're built. And maybe they'll address that at the trade deadline. But there's a lot of question marks just around that aspect of this team. I think talent-wise, the starting lineup, when healthy, is up there with just about anybody in the East.
Yeah. No, they are for sure, and we'll see how they do in this homestand. 5 games coming up for the Knicks at home, which is good for our guy Bondy here because he gets to sleep in his own bed.
I will say this so they don't go for they lead. They're tied with the Pacers for the most road games in the NBA over the next month, and I just wrote a story about this. They don't have to take another plane ride until February 4th. That is excessively rare in the NBA because I think 12 of their next 14 games are at home, and the 2 road games are at Brooklyn and at Philly.
That's huge.
So, yeah, so they don't have to hop on another plane till early February.
That's huge. Now, there are some tougher games this month than they saw
For sure.
last month, so we'll see how they do against the better competition, but it should be an exciting month of Knicks basketball. Some Knicks fans, as I said, Steph, jumping out the window after these 2 losses.
That's fair. I get it. You live and die with the team, and that was especially the Chicago game. It was like, you're supposed to beat that team and you didn't. So I get it. And
I
then you
get
got
it.
to watch at the very end. You see Karl-Anthony Towns limping off. It was a tough scene.
Tough thing to watch. We'll see how the Knicks do on this 5-game homestand. That is Stefan Bondy. Check out his work at nypost.com. Great job covering the Knicks for us here at the New York Post. Steph, appreciate it, man. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
The Knicks are on fire.
Okay, so as we mentioned, the Knicks, they're starting a 5-game homestand this week. And one of the games in the middle of the homestand, everybody's going to be looking forward to the Thunder game, but they do have a game against a team that plays in the NBA north of the border. That would be the Toronto Raptors. So I thought it'd be good. That's the game in the middle of the week for us to look ahead and preview that game. And to preview that game, I have a fantastic journalist. She does an amazing job covering the Raptors for pros and claws, along with dishes and dimes. Her name is Imman Adan, and she joins me now. Imman, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Pleasure to meet you. I've been a fan of your work for quite some time. We were talking about this before, and this is the first time we got to connect to talk some hoops. You're one of the great voices around hoops, so I'm just glad to have you here. Happy New Year to you. How's your New Year going thus far?
It's been great. It's been cold. I've not been a fan of the weather turn. I feel like it was mild in 2024. But no, it's been good. How's your New Year been?
It's been fine, except for the same thing as you. It is cold here in New York. You're north of the border in the 6, which means it's even colder. So I probably should not be complaining. And so I understand. But it was a kind of, as you said, it was a mild start to the winter in December. And then it just got real cold.
Yeah.
But we're surviving. We're here. We got some basketball.
Thug it out.
Yeah, we're thugging it out. We're doing that. I want to start by talking about the Raptors this year because, look, it's been rough for the Raptors this year, right? It's been a rough season. That's me being nice. I'm not going to be mean to the Raptors here. But what do you make of what you've seen? How do you evaluate what you've seen thus far in this 2024-2025 NBA campaign for the Toronto Raptors?
It's been such a rough go of it. And honestly, it feels a little bit like a cop-out, but there's not so much to really sort of glean from what the Raptors have been doing this season. And that's partly because they've had a ton of injuries. Like the trio that Raptor fans call BBQ, which is Barnes, Barrett, and Quickly, they've played all of 0 minutes this season. I don't think they've played a single minute since March. So you just haven't really seen what this team looks like because they've not been able to play a single game together. And still in the early goings, even though the team was losing, it was still kind of exciting because you were seeing them in it. You were seeing them playing hard for the entirety of it. And I would say in the months of like late November and early December, all of that kind of fell apart. And a large part of that is Quickly and Scotty just missing so much time, and Jakob Poeltl as well. So you just don't really know what the Raptors look like, which is very unfortunate when you're in this season, which is a season to really evaluate the talent that you do have, that you're walking away being like, it's December and I haven't seen a single minute of our core playing together. Like when one guy's injured, the other guy's healthy, and then like Scotty and Quickly have just been taking turns being injured, which really just hurts the look of this team.
Yeah, I actually didn't even realize, to be honest with you, that the 3 of them had not played any minutes on the court together that season.
Since like March. Yeah.
Since March, right? So you haven't seen that since last season. And we're going to get into this in a little bit because about where the Raptors are and how they evaluate that talent. But I think Knicks fans that watch this show, they're going to be intrigued to say, okay, they still keep an eye on RJ Barrett. They still keep an eye on Emmanuel Quickly. They want to know how those guys are doing. Going back to last year, post the trade for OG Anunoby and RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly going to Toronto, how have they fit in with the team? I know it's been limited in what you've been able to see this year, but how have those guys fit into the team, and how are they viewed as being centerpieces of this team going forward?
It's been really fun and exciting to watch. I think, like, of course, Raptor fans just love OG Anunoby, and we're very sad to part ways with him. But when you look at what you got back for OG versus what you got back for Pascal Siakam. You take the OG one 10 times out of 10. Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett have been so great on this Raptors team. This is a young team that doesn't really have a culture or an identity. So there was nothing for RJ Barrett and Quickley to try and fit into. They were the ones who came in from a winning scenario, right? Because these are young guys that have not had to win. There are 4 rookies on this Raptors team right now. So these are guys who are brand new and who've never really been in a winning scenario. So you're bringing in RJ and Quickley to be the 2 guys to do it. And RJ's role on this team is very different than it was in New York, primarily because you don't have other lefties taking up the paint, giving him absolutely no room. So he's got a little bit more room to operate with there. He's also, I mean, his 3-point shot has been a revelation. I was expecting it to slow down. As obviously a Team Canada fan, I watched it continue in the summer, and then into this season, I'm seeing it continue there too. So he's really not slowed down. I think if you look at his home splits, he's averaging like 28 points a night at home. He's been a revelation on the offensive end. Defensively, a lot of questions about where he sort of fits on this roster moving forward because he just hasn't been able to do it. Again, this team's been very injured though. But I think where RJ has been at his best is when you see him with a healthy Scottie Barnes, which has been very nice to watch just on the offensive end because RJ has been so incredibly efficient as that secondary and hopefully in the future tertiary scorer on this team. He's just been so good at that when the defense's attention is, of course, focused on Scottie Barnes. So I just think RJ's role has just been so nice to see because it's opened up a lot more in Toronto than I think the chances that he got in New York. And for Quickley, I mean, this team needs a starting point guard, right? Like that's what this team really desperately needs. And if you look at his first game back after missing the majority of this season was against the Brooklyn Nets. And oh my gosh, the team just looked so different. Grady Dick, who's a second-year player, he was actually getting spot-up shots. Like he is the only movement shooter this team has, so he takes the most difficult shots on this team. But you were seeing him just get spot-up looks in the corner, which is just something he has not had all year. You were seeing Scottie not at the top of the key, operating as a de facto point guard, but actually inside operating like a power forward. So Quickley as a point guard, who I know in New York, there was a lot of talk about him being like a more of a 2 guard than a 1 guard, not really that sort of point guard role. But on the Raptors, he's just sort of given the looks as that point guard, not the primary playmaker, not just one of 2 handlers with the, like, no, he is the starting point guard. And it's actually night and day what the offense looks like with Quickley. So I think he's found a role here in the future here. And I think RJ Barrett also kind of has that as that secondary, tertiary option on offense. So it's actually been really nice.
Yeah, it's a trade that I remember, I remember some Knicks fans not being crazy about the trade, which was interesting to me because, OG's such a good 3-and-D player. They feel differently now.
Yeah. OG's really good, guys. I don't think people realize how good he is until he's on your team and you're like, damn.
He's really good. He's a winning player, like really good. And I think listening to you and what you just said in your breakdown of both of these guys, it's worked out for both teams. I know the health hasn't been there. You haven't seen Quickley on the court as much. And Quickley did fancy himself as a point guard, as Knicks fans know here, how the organization looked at him, maybe a little bit different. But you're right. You have seen the difference when he has been on the court and how he's helped that Raptors offense going. Let me just ask you this as a follow-up on Barrett, because you mentioned Team Canada with him. And I felt watching Team Canada, you saw a little bit more of his confidence evolve or bubble up to the surface, shall I say, this summer. Do you think that's really helped him? And do you see another level to RJ Barrett's game in particular? Obviously, defense is a place where he can improve on, but is there another level to his game that you see, Imman?
Yeah, I genuinely think, and this, like, I'm a crazy person, so I was watching Team Canada basketball before the Olympics started when they were out qualifying. And
that is fine. There's no judgment there, Imman. There's no judgment there. There's nothing wrong with
waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, trying to get those games in. It's a little crazy, but I was watching that, and honestly, it started then. It was like, oh, like RJ Barrett is doing something different. And then he joined the Raptors, and you also saw that continue to go. And I do think being in a different role, not being behind multiple guys, not sort of being tasked with, hey, you're the number 3 overall pick. Are you meeting expectations? This, that, and the other. When RJ Barrett came, it was talked about as the Quickly for OG deal. Quickly was seen as the primary piece coming back. RJ Barrett was seen as like the money that you needed to make it work, and also another young piece that maybe you can flip in the future. He wasn't seen as like the big part of this deal, which I think made expectations a little bit lower on him. I also, again, I think not having the Julius Randle, not having those other guys there allowed for RJ's game to really flourish. That 3-point shot has been really nice. He's also like the team's like probably their best finisher by the numbers right now. He's the only person who can get to the line consistently. He's just been doing a lot of the things that this team needs, and he's been a winning player. I think he's taken from what he's seen and done with the Knicks and brought it over here in a way that like it has to improve your confidence when you're now not the little brother, but the big brother. And you also don't have the number 3 expectations on your back, right? Like that's on Scotty. He's our number 4 overall pick. We didn't use a pick for Barrett.
Yeah, I think that was a big thing in New York. There were a lot of expectations with him being the 3rd pick. I don't think that a lot of people, you said you're surprised by it. I don't think a lot of people saw the shooting coming that we've seen thus far this year, but that was the thing you needed to see in RJ Barrett's game in order to think that he could take it to the next level. And speaking of taking it to the next level, I wanted to ask you about Scotty Barnes, because a couple of years ago when they drafted him as a number 4 overall pick, as you talked about, he was seen as, okay, this is the guy that's going to be the centerpiece of this Toronto Raptors franchise. Where are you on Barnes right now? And when you look at him in his game, do you think he's taken another leap in terms of his leadership as well as his on-court performance? Where are you on Barnes?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think that like you're probably going to get a couple of different answers from different people, but in all honesty, I think that Barnes has shown himself to be a winning player. He's this team's most versatile defender, and he's this team's best defender. He is genuinely a game changer on the defensive end, whether he's out on the perimeters or being the backline to your defense if Jakob Poeltl or someone is not there. He has been that guy. And on the offensive end, when the game gets tight and the game slows down, for all of RJ Barrett's growth, why I'm calling him a secondary and even tertiary guy on offense, is he's not the guy that you want to go to when the games get tight and you need someone to get you a basket. He's just, we've seen it because Scotty has been out and we've needed RJ to be that guy. And to his credit, he's been doing a good job of it. But there's a reason why the Raptors at the start of the year were losing so many games by 1 or 2 possessions to close out the game, was because when they just kept losing a lead. They didn't have that sort of primary guy to go to get you that basket. And I will say something to Scotty is, inside, he is still a monster. That, like, his mid-range game has been something that I think has improved this year. That 3-point shot has not improved. His handle has not improved. So he's not improved in the ways that, like, maybe people saw him to start the year out as a sort of de facto point guard, because he's just not that. But as a playmaker on the wings, as, you know, a hub that exists on the wings, as sort of a connector on there, still being that guy, I think he's everything like that on the offensive end. On the defensive end, I think he's also just improved. I think he's just proven to be more versatile, proven to be better. So I think defensively, we've seen that. Offensively, we've maybe not seen the playmaking. We've maybe not seen the point guard duties with the handle and things like that. But that shot making, that mid-range game, that has improved. It's just that the Raptors have not really put him in that scenario to test it out, because he's had to be your point guard with Quickly out. And he's just not that. And that hasn't improved, and that's not his role, and that shouldn't be his role. But you got to do what you got to do when your point guard's hurt.
Which is why you want to see those minutes where you can get him, Barrett, quickly on the court, truly see what this young core is, truly see how that helps Scotty Barnes and his game develop going forward. Now, in terms of developing going forward, you have paid a lot of attention to the NBA. You've seen what's been going on down in Miami with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler's name has come up, Imman, in trade rumors being linked to the Raptors. What do you think about that? Is that a move the Raptors need to make? Because does it really help them short term? Does it help them at all? Not, you wouldn't think not long term. Is this a move you'd want to see the Raptors make? I know people love big names, but Jimmy Butler playing in the six, is that something you want to see?
No. I do love Jimmy Butler, and I can understand his name being linked with the Raptors in the past. He's like best friends with Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan.
Right.
Okay, made sense for those teams maybe. But the Raptors just traded away OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam because they wanted to get younger. They wanted guys to fit around Scotty Barnes, who's 23 years old. They wanted guys in their early 20s. I don't think they're going to go for a guy that's older than both Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet and OG. Like, I don't think that that's what they're going to do. They want to rebuild. They're going the other direction. I just don't see any scenario where Jimmy Butler makes sense for them in the short term or long term, like you said.
Yeah, I just don't see it. I don't see it either, Imman. I don't see it. It's just like I know the Raptors, you've seen Masai Ujiri. We've seen his magic he's done. We've seen him make pretty good trades. I think he always, tell me if I'm wrong, I always feel like he's got a good direction. And this is where we're going to go to the next question about where he wants to go. But what is the direction of the Raptors right now? Because they're not contenders. We know this.
No.
We know this from the record. They're not contenders. Are they rebuilding? Because they've always been between like rebuilding, retooling.
Yeah.
What's their direction? What kind of moves do you think they'll make that'll indicate the trajectory they're trying to be on? They obviously want to get back to contention, but what kind of moves do you think they need to make to get back to that? And where are they right now?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think even to just add on to the Jimmy Butler part of it, what Masai Ujiri has always done, what this front office has always done is just try to be flexible. And so I think why you can talk about, a trade for Jimmy Butler is because like the Raptors are in a scenario where if they do want to add a primary guy, right? Because I don't know that like Scotty is that sort of shot creator primary guy that you need to sort of contend. And they don't have that guy on the roster. So if they want to add that guy, then they can talk about taking that next step because you want the growth from RJ, from Quick, from Scotty and Dick and everybody else on the team. So like maybe there is a buying move that the Raptors can do. It's not Jimmy Butler. He's too old. He doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. But I think that like the Raptors are in a weird scenario where they can buy or they can sell or they can do both because flexibility has been what this team's primary goal has always been, no matter what iteration of the team that you're looking at. And just to answer the question about like, are the Raptors rebuilding? Are they retooling? I think like when we talk about rebuild, often people think it's just bottoming out and just trying to lose as many games, trying to get that pick, which again, doesn't work in today's NBA, right? Like that's not a real thing anymore. You can be like the Pistons, lose all the games in the world and still end up with the 5th pick in back-to-back years. So losing to get a top pick is just not a reality in today's NBA. But what the Raptors are doing is a rebuild. Masai Ujiri called it that. But not necessarily in the idea of bottoming out just to get picks. It's we had this version of a team that was all long wings, right? Just athletic forwards. Everybody was long. Everybody was a wing. We didn't have bigs. We didn't have smalls besides Fred. But everyone just played like a big and can switch. We are done with that and we are having this new team build, which is, I think, a rebuild, right? Like you had this version of your team that doesn't exist any longer and you have a new version of your team. So they rebuild in that way, but not necessarily in bottoming out. They weren't looking for picks back when they traded their guys. They were looking for talent who could play right away. So it technically is a rebuild in that they're rebuilding their identity, but they're not rebuilding in the conventional sense and that they're bottoming out to get Cooper Flagg, who ideally would be great. Let's get him if we can, but that's not the sort of end goal. Your end goal is to build a team with a new identity.
Yeah, and it does feel like that's what they're trying to do. And obviously they haven't had the chances you've mentioned to see that identity come to fruition just because all the guys haven't been on the court at the same time. Okay, Imman, last thing for me here is Knicks Raptors play on Wednesday night this week here in NYC.
Which might be the first game where we get all of them.
And
that actually might be the first game. Yeah.
So this is what we want to see, right? We want to see all of them play. We know IQ is going to be motivated if he's back playing at the Garden. We already seen RJ a couple of times be motivated this season to play against the Knicks. You can tell he's motivated and takes it seriously. And then obviously we talked about Scotty Barnes and his ability to just play with those other two guys and see how his game can flourish there. So even this season, we saw a game north of the border where the game was pretty intense. Games are always pretty intense between the Raptors and the Knicks. When you look at this matchup on Wednesday, especially if all these guys are back for the Raptors, what do you think is going to be key in this game? You know the Raptors are not going to lay down in this one despite the record. What's the key things in this game, Imman?
Honestly, it's gonna have to. I think the Knicks are. I think the Knicks are rolling right now, and like obviously, besides the 2 losses, besides the that happened against the Bulls, which, hey, if somehow the Knicks end up playing a back-to-back, we just move that Orlando game to Tuesday night and we tire you guys out then, like maybe the Raptors can squeak one out. But I genuinely just don't see it for the Raptors. I think that like the intensity that they were playing with at the start of the year, they were playing not just the Knicks type, but they were playing the Nuggets type. They were playing like basically they played the Celtics to overtime and only lost because Davion Mitchell decided to foul Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. Like, they were playing all of these teams really, really tight, like all of the good teams. I think the only teams that truly blew them out at the time were OKC and the Cavs, which made sense considering they're OKC and the Cavs. But that has gone away. Their defensive intensity has gone away. They just kind of look like a different team right now. And I think that losing sort of builds up. And so I think the Raptors team that you're probably going to see now, unless the new year has changed things, is very different than the team that was playing at the start of the year where there was that level of intensity up. So I don't have high hopes for the Raptors pulling that one out. Unfortunately, I can't even lie to try and gain something. Here's what I'll say. Barrett is questionable for tomorrow's game against the Bucks. So if he skips that one and does come out against the Knicks, maybe just having a full roster for the first time this year will just rejuvenate the guys and they'll be playing high and they'll want to stick it to New York in New York, right? Like, I don't know. But I don't see it. I don't see it, but maybe.
You never know, and you don't know what can spark a young team. They're looking for wins. The one thing I would say is, and I think from watching the Raptors and the games I watch, is that they're not, yes, I agree the intensity hasn't been the same, but they're not laying down. And I do expect them to get up for this one big game at the Garden. You have the guys returning back to the Garden who will get some love until they start hitting a couple of shots. Then they'll probably hear some boos. But you know how it goes. But we'll see. The Raptors, they're rebuilding. We'll see how they go, but it should be a good one on Wednesday night at the Garden. That is Imman Adan. Check her out. Pros and Claws. Also, Dishes and Dimes does a great job covering the Raptors in the 6. Imman, glad to have you here in New York Got Game. We'll have to have you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks. If I can plug one thing, if you want to go listen to Dishes and Dimes, our last episode, and we are doing a follow-up, I keep teasing it. Our last episode was interviewing Tim Donaghy. Oh. So go check that one out. It's been out for a while, but we're doing a follow-up on that Tim Donaghy episode where we get to talk to him about, everything that happened with Tim Donaghy, the disgraced NBA referee. So yeah.
I am intrigued to check that out because as the big NBA junkie that I am, I'm very intrigued to see what he has to say. So please go check that out on Dishes and Dime. They do a great job covering the NBA. And like I said, Imman does a fantastic job covering the Raptors. Imman, I will have you on here again soon to talk hoops or anything, but I really appreciate the time and you breaking down this matchup for you. Thank you so much.
This is fun. Thanks.
All right, Knicks got some big games this week. Like I said, some playoff teams coming up starting Monday against Orlando. Later in the week on Friday, you heard me and Stefan Bondy talk about that huge rematch against the Thunder. I know everybody is going to be excited about that and can't wait to see what the Knicks do when they see the Thunder again. Look, I think the Knicks will be ready for this matchup with the Thunder. Do they have some concerns with their depth? Yes. Is there some real questions about should Tom Thibodeau play younger players more, maybe in lesser games to gain them some more experience so we can gain their trust? I think that's legit, but I'm just not sure which way works. It's kind of really complicated because the Knicks do not have players with at the end past maybe the 8th, 9th spot in the rotation who have the requisite experience. And I understand why Tom Thibodeau doesn't trust them. I understand why fans want to see some of those young players get some experience. I think you can give them experience sometimes in some games. Maybe it's Wednesday against the Raptors. We'll see. Maybe that's a game where you can get those guys some minutes and they can learn just in case you do have injuries and do have to use these guys. You can rely on them later in the season. I know that's something my friend Gerard Hector says all the time, and maybe that's something you can see. We're going to talk more about that. How the Knicks' depth is, how this affects them, will be something that fans are going to be talking about, us in the media will be talking about throughout the rest of this month. So it's something to absolutely keep an eye on. But another great episode. Special thanks to my guest. First up, Stefan Bondy from the New York Post, Knicks beat writer, doing a great job joining me here on New York Got Game. And Imman Adan, great job from Pros and Claws and Dishes and Dimes, breaking down the matchup with the Raptors. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back again with another live show this Thursday evening, myself and Brian Fonseca. We will have a special guest to preview Friday's matchup with the Oklahoma City Thunder that everybody's going to be looking forward to. So New York Got Game, Knicks Weekly Live should be another good one this week. Thursday at 7:30. Tap in with us for that one. Thank you to everybody who works and makes this show possible. My editor, Antonio Oliveris Nicole. Appreciate the great job you've done on this one. We'll be back next week after the live show on Thursday with another episode of New York Got Game. Until then, be well, be safe. Not going to say Happy New Year again. We'll catch you next time on New York Got Game.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.